I was apprehensive at first to jump into Celeste, the new 2D platformer created by Matt Thorson, as my Switch library has been inundated with platformers since early 2017. Games like Goner, Snake Pass, and Super Mario Odyssey offered loads of artistic charm and mechanical challenge, and while Matt's commitment to quality was evident in his previous release, Towerfall Ascension, I wasn't sure if I was ready to spend time with another platformer so soon. However, I reluctantly purchased Celeste, mostly because I have zero self-control, and loaded the title's first chapter, The Forsaken City. Underneath the game's familiar pixel art and chiptune-inspired soundtrack lied intense challenge, a sobering, relatable story, and most importantly, well-conceived level design. Celeste introduces its essential mechanics and overall goal, which is to climb upwards, within the first few minutes of the game. Everything after that serves to make those two pillars more interesting or difficult to execute. The essential mechanics are comprised of a floaty jump, a one-time use air dash that replenishes itself upon the player touching the ground or a green crystal, and finally, the ability to grab and climb onto non-hostile surfaces for a short period of time. Celeste then fleshes out a basic yet consistent rule set throughout its beginning levels, first being the fact that the behavior of most objects and enemies in the game are altered or triggered by the player's presence and interaction. This is demonstrated to users within the first 20 seconds of the game actually, wherein a giant ice block falls from its place as soon as Madeline, the player-controlled character, passes beneath it. Secondly, since the hostile presence of spikes and pits have been inferred through several decades of gaming, Celeste doesn't have to spend much time communicating this danger to the player. Regardless, Madeline's extremely low damage threshold, paired with Celeste's incredibly generous respawn and checkpoint system, allow new gamers to learn this lesson, albeit in a much shorter amount of time. Once these rules have been established and players understand them, they then have the tools and freedom needed to fully explore the secrets of each level. Like most platformers, Celeste's individual levels are designed around a specific theme and a subgroup of mechanics. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze's Horn Top Hop, for example, is a level built around the idea of horns and pressurized air spouts, and in it players have to propel themselves forward with giant horns, platform across falling leaves, or navigate through sets of leaves that are being propelled by giant horns. For more on that, check out Mark Brown's video on Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze's awesome level design. Celeste is no stranger to this approach of level design, however. Most chapters of the game pick a distinct theme, some of which are directly informed by the game's story, while others seem to have been chosen for the way they inspire interesting mechanics. On the Golden Ridge, players have to bounce from cloud to cloud while fighting against the violent gusts produced by the mountain. In order to open up new pathways that allow further progress through the level, the Mirror Temple requires us to solve puzzles by manipulating a system of switches, and this is made much more difficult when the level later introduces a set of enemies that home in on the player's location. I want to take a closer look at the game's first couple of levels, however, namely the Forsaken City and the Old Site, as I think Celeste uses these chapters to teach the player two important lessons that are crucial to understanding the overall level design of the entire game. The first chapter of the game starts with Madeline arriving at Celeste Mountain's base camp, where the surrounding environment immediately guides players in an upward direction. In case there's any confusion as to which direction we need to venture towards, a bird flies into the scene and presents us with our first action prompt, which is to climb upwards. The next few scenes give us the chance to jump and climb about in a relatively hazard-free environment. Next, after speaking with the game's first non-player character, who's an elderly woman living on Celeste Mountain, we're tasked with crossing a bridge that starts collapsing after we're only a few steps onto it. Instantly, we feel the urge to escape and survive, so naturally, we as players start running towards the opposite side of the screen. At the last second, however, the bridge collapses in front of us, thus requiring two well-timed jumps in order to span the gaps. Players who properly utilize their running start to propel themselves forward and into the air will land to the next platform safely. However, there's a second and final jump required to make it across the bridge, and there's no feasible way for new players to jump far enough. At this moment, Celeste introduces players to the air dash, which is the final tool that rounds out the game's essential moveset. The bridge sequence not only introduces an essential tool to the player, but it also requires them to successfully execute previously developed skills and reinforces the inherent danger of falling. Furthermore, this sequence introduces the game's first major theme to the player, which is momentum. Throughout the Forsaken City, players will be presented with puzzles and challenges that need to be solved using the principle of momentum. Rigged platforms can be triggered and utilized to fling the player across massive gaps. Green crystals are used to continue the player's movement chain in order to avoid death, and stone platforms crumble beneath Madeline's feet if players don't jump off of them in time. Later in the game's second chapter, this idea of momentum is further expanded on by reinforcing the need for precision when executing skills from the movement set. The level is inhabited by giant celestial space rectangles that swiftly propel the player in whichever direction they enter. If the player jumps into the space bars at the wrong angle, they'll be smushed into a neighboring wall or worse, a spike pit. At the end of the chapter, the game spawns evil clones of Madeline who chase after her in order to end her life. Since these clones follow the exact path as the player, it's eventually learned that a fluid and well thought out movement path will eventually lead the player to safety. While these mechanics and ideas aren't necessarily new to platformers, Matt Thorson has utilized them to create varied level designs that are incredibly fun to traverse. The ghostly theme behind the Celestial Resort requires a much more methodical playstyle than one adopted in the Forsaken City, as players have to maneuver through ectoplasmic goo that's constantly shifting and moving around. A later chapter titled Reflection requires mastery over the gamepad's analog sticks, since it requires players to move a feather through spike-covered tunnels. Celeste's intense challenge is juxtaposed by a generous checkpoint system that allows us to make mistakes and immediately employ the new strategies that we learn from them, which is exactly why the game has been so quickly embraced by the speedrunning community. Celeste's gorgeous packaging, surprisingly relatable story, and consistent mechanics make for a platforming experience that I'd recommend to anyone. However, it's really the game's brilliant level design that makes it so unforgettable. I've racked up over 1,500 deaths in my first 8 hours of the game, and honestly, I can't wait for the next 1,000. Celeste provides challenge and reward unlike most other games that have released in the past year, and you absolutely owe it to yourself to try it. Hey, what's up everybody? Alex here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your week to watch something that I made. I really sincerely appreciate that. If you like this video, don't forget OK Beast puts out new videos every Friday, so hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date on that. If you like podcasts, written reviews, or articles, go over and check out okbeast.com. And I know I haven't taken down my tree yet. I'm gonna do that this weekend. I've just been playing awesome games and haven't really had time. But thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.